Welcome to Biocanic's Health Intelligence Exchange community, where leading practitioners in integrative health approaches will discuss how they solve the most challenging and common health issues. These regular Q&A discussions are designed to take a deep dive into case studies and integrative approaches in order to elevate the collective knowledge of both experienced and new practitioners alike. Biocanic's Health Intelligence Exchange, your community for functional medicine.
Welcome to the Health Intelligence Exchange, everyone. I'm Nicole Brors from Biocanic, and today I'm joined by Amelia Scott Barrett from the Migraine Relief Code. And today we're going to be discussing precision strategies for migraine relief and brain health. And for those of you joining live today, we will be transitioning to a live Q&A towards the end of the live stream, so feel free to start posting your questions as we go along in the comments below. Dr. Amelia Scott Barrett, MD, is a Stanford-trained neurologist and the founder of Migraine Relief Code. With over 20 years in private practice, she grew a thriving clinic in Denver while caring for thousands of patients. Her journey from traditional neurology to functional medicine began with one persistent question from her patients: why am I having these headaches in the first place? Seeking better answers than prescriptions alone could offer, she turned to advanced testing, neuroscience, and precision health solutions. Today, Dr. Barrett uses cutting-edge tools like functional genomics to uncover the root causes of migraines and teach women how to support brain health on a cellular level. Through Migraine Relief Code, she empowers people everywhere to move beyond symptom management and reclaim a vibrant, pain-free life with science-backed, personalized care. Thank you so much for joining us today, Amelia. Very excited for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So let's start kind of with your story. What was the turning point that led you from traditional neurology to creating the Migraine Relief Code and really focusing on the functional medicine for brain health?
It's really that better science came along. I mean, the latest breakthroughs in migraine aren't in doctors' offices. They're in your DNA. They're in new technology devices that allow you to monitor your body. They're in new labs that allow you to gain more information about your body than ever before. And that includes functional genomics as well. So I think that's really what motivated me to change. Migraine is a huge problem. It is the #1 cause of disability in women under 50. Wow. Think about that. That's a lot of women who, can no longer raise their kids, build a career the way they want to because they're stuck in bed with a migraine. So I feel like it's a huge problem, and I wanted to bring solutions to people on a larger scale than just one person at a time in my office. So offering these tools online made sense and gave me a much more effective solution to help people with migraines that's so much more effective than just being a pill pusher, which is honestly kind of how I felt about conventional neurology.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really crazy statistic. That the #1 leading cause. And I know from working with clients in the past, the ones that did have migraines, it's debilitating. You cannot do anything in your life. So I love that you are in this field, and I'm really excited to learn more. When you talk about kind of the root causes and, as you kind of go through this path of trying to get to that root cause and really not just patching it up with a prescription or pill, a lot of patients ask, why am I having these headaches in the first place? Has the way that testing, has changed over the years and the technology, has that kind of changed your understanding of that? And how has that question and the answer kind of evolved throughout the years?
Absolutely. So really, I think the best answer to that question is coming from what we've learned about the genetics of migraine. So we have been able to put, 100,000 sets of genetics through these big machines, and they analyze it all in what we call genome-wide association studies. And that gives us a clue as to, okay, here's 100,000 people with migraines. What do their genes have in common? And how are they different from 500,000 other people who don't have migraine at all? What is different about these people? And so what we've discovered from this is that there are almost 200 different genes that are linked to migraine, and they basically fall into 4 different categories. So all of these genes regulate one of 4 different systems in our brain. So those are really what the root causes are. And so those are problems with brain chemistry, problems with inflammation, problems with mitochondrial energy generation. I'm so glad we have healthcare providers here. We can use those terms. And problems with vascular reactivity. So those are the root causes. That's what the genetics has shown us.
That's really interesting. And it's great that we've been able to have that data to show that. From there, once you kind of fit them into one of these 4 categories, is there, further testing that you do? Okay, you're in this category. Here's how we're going to test. Or is it you're in this category and now we know how to move forward based on that?
A little of both. So, let's say you have terrible genetics for vitamin D. We all know that vitamin D is important for brain health, right? Let's say you have very challenged genetics, but we check a vitamin D level and it's great. I like to use a range of between 50 and 70 for people with brain health issues. Let's say your level 65, everything you're doing is working. So if you're spending time in the sunshine, if you're taking vitamin D, whatever you're doing, it's working. And so that's a case where even though you have a genetic challenge, you don't really need to change what you're doing. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I have had the difficulties of getting vitamin D up with people many times. And so when you have the genetics, you can start to understand, okay, why will this person's vitamin D just not come up no matter what I do? I believe that they're taking it. What is going on under the surface? Well, you can look at the pattern and figure out why that might be. Do they need to take it more often? Do they just need a higher dose than what you're used to using? It helps you kind of triage what those problems are under the surface when you've got the genetic data about where the system is breaking down. But I think that, the important information here is, what are you at risk for? And then has that actually caused any problems in your body? And so, using that vitamin D example, you can apply that to 30, 40, 50 other things that are going on with migraine and say, okay, these are the problems that we need to work on because you're genetically challenged, and the data that we're able to get shows that, yep, this is showing up in your body as a real issue. So the important thing for people with migraines then is they have clarity. They're not stuck with trial and error thinking, which supplement should I take? What lifestyle habit should I adopt? Which migraine diet should I follow? There are 10 different books out there and they're all different, telling you what to eat for migraines, and it's like, well, yeah, it depends on how you're wired, right? This subset will work for these people. This subset will work for these people. And it just gives people so much clarity and peace of mind to know exactly what they need to be spending their very limited bandwidth on doing.
Absolutely. And I think that's so important because I think so many patients and clients now, they see something being marketed and they're like, this is good for migraines, or they see all of the testimonials that this will work for migraines, but it will if you fall into the same bucket as that person did. But if you don't, then you need to go down that different route. So I think that's such a great insight, and just knowing that and educating them on that as well.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the inflammation piece. Inflammation is definitely like a big hot topic, and the inflammation connection. Many chronic conditions kind of point back to inflammation. So can you talk a little bit about like what role inflammation plays in migraines and overall brain health, and how you kind of see that in that category?
Yeah. And I think it can really affect the body in different ways, depending on what you're prone to genetically. So like, let's say your brain chemistry genes aren't great. Okay. Well, then anything that makes it so that your neurons, your brain cells, aren't getting what they need could trigger basically a cell damage response in that neuron and bring in more inflammation. What does inflammation do? It kind of destroys things, right? Mm-hmm. So if your cells don't have enough nutrients, let's say, or energy for your mitochondria, those could be things that trigger inflammation within the brain itself. But there's also this issue of inflammation from the body crossing the blood-brain barrier and causing problems. Leaky gut is something that we're all familiar with and quite common in, well, everybody, but particularly people who have migraines. We have known for decades that there is overlap in the genetics between things like inflammatory bowel syndrome and migraine. They travel together. Well, what's going on there under the surface? That's body inflammation. So I think it can impact you in either way, kind of depending on what your genetics are. And those are very different solutions that we just talked about, right? One's nutrients, one's gut health, and to some extent they all go together, but you can target your solutions much more precisely once you have that data about what's really going on in the body.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of creating that algorithm of like, okay, here's the 4 categories. And then once you're getting in there, what are the next things that we're going to look at so that we know, again, really creating that custom tailored protocol for you're going through the program. And you've talked a little bit about the vitamin D deficiency being something that you really see, or like the, not being able to keep vitamin D levels up in the body. Are there some other nutrients that or other pathways that you've kind of seen that are very prevalent or that are notable?
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I think that you can get a pretty good set of labs, even from LabCorp or Quest, without having to dive too deep into functional medicine labs, which obviously help you more. But, the big players are also things like vitamin B12. We know that memory is dependent on normal B12 function. Your nerve cells, your neurons aren't going to work right unless they've got a proper level of B12. So that's a key player. There's not a lot of research linking it to migraine, but anybody who's ever talked to somebody with migraines knows that they all complain about their brain not working right? They can't remember anything. They're wondering if it's a migraine prodrome or a migraine postdrome, So let's just fix that. That seems obvious, right? Omega-3 index is kind of a surprise one that really is very fixable and results in a substantial improvement in migraines. There was a study in the British Medical Journal that was published in 2021, and it showed that if you have people eat 4 to 8 ounces of salmon every day, and okay, I know that's a deal breaker for some people, but just bear with me here. If you eat 4 to 8 ounces of salmon every day and swap out your oils for a combination of olive oil and macadamia nut oil, then you can cut headaches in half in 3 months, which is, I know, it's stunning for one intervention. I get it. It's kind of a big intervention, but it is just, it's bumping up omega-3s and dropping omega-6s, right? So what the macadamia nut oil does in the olive oil is it makes it so you can fry with it, right? So that they've got one oil that can solve all their needs, except possibly baking cake. I'm not sure you want to use olive oil, maybe not, but
lemon olive oil, yeah, might work.
You could, but at least you've got one oil that you can use for everything. You can make a salad dressing out of it. You can fry at high temperatures with it, which you kind of can't do with straight up olive oil, right? Your whole kitchen's gonna get smoky and make carcinogens and bad things. But so you just do these 2 things, you're bumping up omega-3s, dropping omega-6s, and that's enough to take people from 16 headache days a month down to 9 in this study. This really shocked the headache world because we would be thrilled with medications that do that good of a job. Now, I have told many, many people this who seriously just look at me and say, yeah, but I'm not going to eat that much salmon. So, you may need to modify the plan a little bit based on who you're talking to.
Yeah. And is that very, I'm definitely all for whole foods, but is that very much based in getting that omega-3 from whole foods rather than any kind of supplementation?
So the data from whole food is better than the data from supplementation. Of course, if I'm dealing with that person who's looking at me like, yeah, right, then I'm going to say, well, take some fish oil then, and I don't know if it needs to be 1,000 or 2,000 a day. I would base that on their omega-3 index. Really, we're shooting for very high levels. I like the levels that Dr. Dale Bredesen uses in his studies for people with Alzheimer's disease, because talk about protecting brain cells. I mean, he's got that wired. So I think if we're going to heal brain cells, let's just use good numbers. And that's an omega-3 index of about 10. So it's high. But, if you can do that with something that the patient's going to cooperate with you on and get it done, you'll see a much greater resilience in the brain cells and a resistance to generating migraine. The brain goes back to functioning the way it was meant to.
That's amazing. I mean, that is a really big statistic, and that can be really meaningful for people that are suffering with this. And I think also when you get somebody like, it doesn't sound like a quick win, it's not overnight, but that's still, in the term of healing, that's a pretty quick win. To be able to get that is still, okay, here's the first step that we can do that. And then from there we can keep doing things. But I think it's probably very motivating to be able to see that change, that quickly.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
Yeah. I would be interested to know, are there any kind of big mistakes that you see maybe practitioners making when working with migraine patients, or, maybe something that you have done in the past or something that you've seen, any kind of like advice that you've seen that is just, besides, of course, like you can't just, there's not a one size fits all, but.
Yeah. I mean, I think a common mistake in conventional medicine is relying exclusively on medications. I know you guys are busy. But you've got to bring in some kind of lifestyle solution, even if it's as simple as helping that patient sleep better. There are numerous sleep trackers. All you have to do is suggest it and tell them to use that device to help get their sleep better. I think a common mistake I see in functional medicine practitioners is only thinking about gut health. There's more to migraine than that. There really are. The neuroanatomy, the brain cells, kind of where the heart of it is. So don't leave that out. And big pieces of that are nutrients and mitochondrial energy support, whether that's giving the mitochondria proper nutrients, whether that's getting rid of toxic byproducts of metabolism. I think of it as clearing the exhaust out of the cells, whether that's removing toxins from the brain. Toxin testing is incredibly important for people with migraines. I've seen huge transformations by fixing that problem. And we don't do enough about it. Yeah, as you guys probably know, like we do not appreciate how toxic our world is and how hard we have to work to get rid of that from our body and our brain. So I think those are some of the big areas where people can really dial in deeper and get people better health.
So would you say that when everybody comes in, you run the genomics test, you test the genes and you see that you fit them into the categories? Is there like any other tests that you will run standard kind of no matter what, or is it really based on, kind of what you see from that first test? Because you mentioned kind of like the toxin, like seeing the, the different toxins. Is that something that you'd recommend across the board, or kind of more specific to certain people?
For sure, if they have impaired detox genetics, GST genes, if they've got impaired SOD2, GPX, absolutely. All of those people need toxin testing, in my opinion. I think I see more high levels of toxins in older folks than in 20-year-olds. So that will definitely increase my likelihood of recommending that. I think everybody who will pay for it should have it done. I think adrenal testing is really important for people with migraines too. They often have this tendency to sort of pop a pill and power through, and they're depleting their body in ways they don't see. We are so conditioned to minimize our headaches, to not consider it a brain disease, to just mask the pain and power through, that I think people end up being very surprised at how depleted their body is. So that can just be a real eye opener, and it can give them permission to just create a cocoon for their own healing, to say, hey, maybe I can slow down. Maybe it's time to prioritize my own health. And it can really give them permission for that. And then I like food sensitivity testing. I know it's controversial, but I think it really helps people figure out what to steer clear of now, at least for a short period of time while you're healing.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And I love the way that you said that. It's usually something that, in the short-term interim, let's take away these. And then as you heal, you may be able to introduce this again, and it's not going to be the same. And I think most practitioners, are aware of that and understand that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love that. Those are some really great insights. So thank you for kind of sharing kind of the different protocols and strategies you're using. I would love to hear kind of some kind of clinical win, like a real world kind of success story where, you had somebody, just some kind of case study, somebody came in and, maybe feeling kind of hopeless or a hard case or however you want to kind of steer this. But we always love a good case study and real life testimonial.
Yeah, I just got a video testimonial back from somebody that, it was just so powerful. So started working with her probably a year ago. She had multiple problems going on. She was having headaches every single day when she came into the course, had them that badly for about a year. And I work with people online. So, it can be people from anywhere. And she, did the initial stuff. I feel like the nutrients are the low hanging fruit, right? It's always easy to fix those problems. You take your supplement, it's probably going to go up. So fixed all that, got her genetics back. And the big issue for her was brain chemistry. Specifically, she had a bottleneck in serotonin production. Now, serotonin is one of the most important neurotransmitters for migraine. We know based on functional MRI that people with migraines tend to have lower levels of serotonin circuitry, serotonin firing. It can show up different ways depending on how you're measuring it. And so genetically, she had this bottleneck in serotonin production and another problem, taking the serotonin back up from the synapse. So just quick neuroanatomy refresher, the neuron spits out neurotransmitters into this cleft. It's basically received kind of in a catcher's mitt by the neuron on the other side of the synaptic cleft, and then it's used. That neuron does what it's need to do. You always spit out too much. Your body recycles that serotonin that gets spit out into the synaptic cleft. She had an issue there also. And so we had to work pretty hard on the serotonin system. There are lots of ways you can do that. There are supplements. But for her, she had this dramatic response to 5-HTP. Now, 5-HTP does not have great data in migraine patients, but part of the reason is we give it to everybody, right? Not everybody has that bottleneck. And so specifically for the people who have that bottleneck, yeah, it's going to be a wonder drug, but for people who don't, like if they've got a whole different, genetic migraine type, then that's not going to work for them. So how do we do science these days? We give it, we give 5-HTP to half the people with migraine, we give a placebo to the other half, and we say, okay, did they do any better or not? Now, if there are enough people in the study that you're going to catch all those people with those particular bottlenecks in serotonin metabolism, great, you'll get results. If you don't, you're not going to see anything, and you're going to think, oh, this drug doesn't work for migraine. And so, because of these new genetic insights, we are now having to go back and rethink a lot of our data and strategies for how we do studies, because we have to take these, genetic migraine types into account. So for this particular person, 5-HTP ended up being, the last thing in a series of a dozen steps that we took, but that was the thing that took her down to 1 headache day a week. And she has just been thrilled. She feels like she has her life back. She can concentrate at work again. She can show up for her husband and her kids. It's really awesome. It's really awesome.
That's such a transformation.
Yeah.
It is such an interesting insight when you think about research, when we're looking at the research to say, well, this only worked in 25% of patients. Well, maybe those were the 25% that it was meant to work for.
Exactly.
That's so powerful right there. And that's why I love, with Biocanic and our platform, because we collect these data points. If we're sending out these trackers to say, hey, how many headaches are you having? And then we're doing that test, you can say, hey, everybody with this marker that, we put on this program, we actually had a 90% success rate because we knew which bucket they were falling into. Like, I don't know if you've, we're kind of announcing this, but we're working on, a platform where we will be able to aggregate all that data and to be able to see that on a cohort. And I think that has a potential, especially with what you're talking about, to kind of redefine the research that we're used to seeing in a more meaningful way, in a way that actually is more scientifically backed, honestly.
Yeah, it's the future of medicine. It absolutely is. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I love what you're doing. This is amazing. So are there any, talking about emerging tools, are there any new technology or research developments that are kind of exciting you about the future of migraine relief and brain health care that are coming up on the horizon or that have recently come up?
I do like some of these smart devices. I think they're really good tools for people with migraines. An Aura ring is a simple and incredibly valuable tool for somebody to help dial in their sleep. So all you have to do is tell them, hey, you need to be getting at least an hour of deep sleep a night and at least 7 hours sleep overall. Aura kind of overwhelms you with data, to be honest. But you just tell your patients that. And then as they make interventions, they can just kind of track it and see how things are going. I mean, it's shocking how many people are getting 15, 20 minutes of deep sleep a night before they start really dialing in their sleep habits and their sleep supplements and, start hardwiring their brain in a better rhythm. But they can make one intervention, see how that works for a week, make another intervention, see how that works for a week. People get very frustrated by making big changes that don't help. And so I think when you give them feedback, then they start to make progress. I think CGMs are the same. I love giving people that moment-to-moment feedback about what their meal composition is doing to their blood sugar level. And this actually is relevant for people with migraines. A lot of people with migraines feel like they'll get a migraine if they get hungry. So what do? They eat carbs every couple hours to make sure their blood sugar doesn't get low. And we all know what that does. It just puts them on this roller coaster. Once they start seeing the roller coaster and understanding why they're getting low and changing the meal composition before that low, so the low never happens, then they get fewer migraines. And they don't need to use a CGM forever. They can use it for a month or two, get the data, understand it, embody that knowledge in their experience, and then they make better decisions moving forward. And it protects their vascular health long-term, because obviously people with migraines are at increased risk for heart attack and stroke. So we need to keep their sugars down.
Yeah, absolutely. I love those. So it sounds like CGMs are a really powerful tool. And then any of the trackers that are kind of tracking the sleep score. And I can attest to that. I've definitely had clients where, you start making changes and they just see, when they can see like, oh, my deep sleep has changed or my REM sleep. That's not something that you can wake up and be like, oh, I feel a little bit more rested maybe. But in the beginning, you may not see those. So when you actually see some numbers, it's like, ooh, it kind of gamifies it a little bit.
Exactly. You've got to give them some early wins so that their numbers are getting better before they get better.
Absolutely. I love that. And I love that too. I know on our platform with our trackers now, you can overlay those. It'd be interesting to kind of see, headaches maybe overlaid with some of that CGM data or some of that sleep data and seeing kind of when those occur and the severity of them. So yeah, definitely having those tools can be helpful. So I want to ask also for all the practitioners that are watching today, what do you think? And I think I know the answer to this, but what's one thing that they can implement immediately to better support migraine patients in their practice?
Genetic testing, honestly, functional genomics. And, I make it easy. You keep doing what you're doing. I can just take care of the genetics piece, dial that in. You can keep doing what you're doing. If you don't want to take the time to learn all of the migraine targeted genes and the categories and yada, yada, it's just like a little optional add-on that you can dial in so that you've got that piece. If you have people who are having headaches that impact their day. There are a lot of people out there who are having headaches more days than not. And that's a problem that needs to be fixed before they're going to feel good.
Yeah, absolutely. And so is this, am I understanding that when someone gets this test, you can help practitioners as well as patients kind of interpret these results and kind of figure out what buckets those go into?
Absolutely. Happy to. So for me, and none of the commercially available genetic testing was precise enough. So I created my own set of tests that are particularly relevant for neuronal health that are based on these genome-wide association studies that have shown us what those genetic linkages with migraine are. And, so the details of it, it does kind of get in the weeds. It gets pretty scientific and maybe not the best way for practitioners to be spending their time. I think you all understand like brain chemistry, inflammation, mitochondria, vascular health. Like you can definitely, once you know what to hone in on, you can take that and run with it. But I think what's helpful is it's essentially getting the diagnosis, right? It's kind of understanding what those underlying body systems are, and that you can either take it and run with it. I'll help you, tell you the stuff that tends to work better for the brain. So I think there are lots of ways to get it. Or if you don't want to deal with any of it at all, just tell them to, go to theheadachequiz.com and they can figure out, kind of based on symptoms, what their genetic migraine type might be. And then there are, resources from there for all price points, depending on how deeply people want to go into that work and how much data they want. Obviously data costs money. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you provide that, because I do think that, most of us as, functional medicine practitioners, we can take, once we know that cause, we can take, we know the protocol. But
you guys, you're all over inflammation.
I don't know that I'm like a trained neurologist. I don't know if I could translate that much. Right. Bridging that gap is just wonderful. And I think that just that step could just help so many people, so that they're not discussing that. Well, this worked for my last, many patients with migraines, or, trying to figure out that data.
Yeah.
Let's see. So I had a question. I don't know if this is from the audience. I do know we have a couple of those coming up. So are there certain types of people that you see who end up with more headaches?
Of the 4 genetic migraine types, almost 90% have problems with their brain chemistry. So I would say the linkages with mood disorders like depression or anxiety and insomnia are probably more common than any of the other ones. The other ones are a smaller percentage of the total people. And keep in mind, people can have more than one, right? You don't have to just have one problem in your body. You can have a lot. So, you can, but I think that it's important to keep in mind that mood and insomnia connection is going to be there for most of them, whether they'll talk to you about it or not, whether they think their sleep is impacted or not. If they wake up and drink 3 cups of coffee and feel great, they're going to tell you, no, my sleep is good, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when people get used to operating kind of at a certain baseline that's maybe a little bit lower, like they don't actually realize what it means to feel well rested or really good.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
And is there any kind of, do you think that falls into any kind of specific like demographic or kind of like lifestyle, or are there anything that you kind of see like certain types of people that are falling into this, or it's just like the genes kind of can range over different types of people?
Well, it's definitely more common in women. We have more estrogen fluctuations, and that definitely affects, it affects your vasculature. That's the mechanism by which the migraine is generated, which is quite interesting. That's what's going on when you lift back the hood there. And, it's related to vascular tone, vasodilation, vasoconstriction, and estrogen is a big player in that. So definitely women are impacted more than men. And those statistics from the Global Burden of Disease report looked at women and men, but it's only for women that we found migraine to be the leading cause of disability for women under 50. That's not the case for men. So I think definitely going to be more common in women.
Yeah. And I wonder, women in that age too, if we're looking at, postmenopausal versus women that are cycling, it sounds like because there's such a link with estrogen, I've often heard, migraines that are very cyclical and linked with that. And it sounds like that is one of the biggest causes because of estrogen fluctuations and how those work together.
Yeah, sure can be. Sure can be. So, obviously a fan of postmenopausal HRT, stabilize your estrogen, and protect your brain cells, heart cells, bone cells. So I think that's a good thing to think about too.
Awesome. And there's a couple more audience questions. So I'm going to kind of go through these. If you are watching the replay, feel free to post your questions in the comments as well. And we can always come back and answer those at a later time. So I'll get through a couple more of these audience questions. Are there any specific questions outside of genetic testing that you have seen to pinpoint issues like the issues with serotonin that you mentioned? any specific questions that you could ask somebody?
Yeah. So there's definitely the linkage with mood disorders and sleep. I think also the people who have the brain chemistry subset tend to they'll have more fatigue during the day because of those sleep problems. They might respond to workouts by feeling emotionally uplifted in the beginning, because of course exercise boosts your brain chemicals, but then sort of depleted afterwards from their fatigue. They may give you that kind of history. They may respond to alcohol differently. It may be much more of a depressant for them. And they may have this sort of, how do we call it, type A personality. This is interesting stuff that comes from the world of Ayurveda about the personality type of people who are prone to migraine, but they do tend to push through a little more, be a little less caretaking of themselves. They may have a little bit more of that personality type. But I think the key thing is really those serotonin symptoms. And, like I said, the hard thing is drawing anxiety symptoms out of them when they may be just dismissing it. Nope, my life's not stressful, or this is a good one, it's not any worse than it's always been.
Stress is just a part of day-to-day life. It's how everybody operates.
Yeah. My life has always been stressful. Well.
Yeah, very important. And I think it's good to know, when we're asking and having people go through their assessments and asking these questions, to really, if somebody is saying they're having migraines, to kind of look at those as well, to give some insight into that.
Yeah.
So let's take a couple more questions from the audience here. Since we were talking about estrogen, are you seeing that with the increase of microplastics and estrogen, are you seeing more headaches kind of that are spurred in that way, or that are tied to that? Has that made any difference in what you've seen?
Oh, goodness. Yes. And this is so depressing, you guys. There was an article published in this month or last month's Headache Journal, the Journal of Headache and Facial Pain. And it was of adolescents, so kids 19 and under. And it showed a 25% increase in migraines. I know, which is just really depressing because it already impacts women's lives so dramatically. And we're about to see a whole bunch more people suffer with this. I mean, it was really depressing. And so I do think that part of that is plastics. Love that theory about what might be going on there. Some of it could just be modern life, the way we push our teenagers, the way they stay up too late, their phones, all those things. All of that could be too, but I think that's very perceptive, that link between plastics and estrogen. That could be part of it. That particular study didn't look at that, but that would be interesting to know. And I think it's another thing that's in the mix of all those toxins that we're all exposed to these days.
Yeah. I mean, then that's just very statistically significant to say a 25% raise. And I'm sure it is a mix of all of those things that we're looking at, knowing the world, and also knowing just like functional medicine. That's, we always look at all those factors. Have you worked with a traumatic brain injury? And is there any common connection that you've seen with that and migraines?
Oh, now this is interesting, actually. So some people recover from concussion TBI, some people don't. Okay, I worked with concussion patients for years in a chiropractic clinic. And it turns out that the people who don't recover very well tend to have problems with BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, that gene. And there are specific things you can do to help that gene. So ketosis tends to help those people. Ketosis stimulates the production of BDNF. So that can be a pretty easy tool to bring in for people, even if it's just intermittent fasting. Give them a couple hours of ketosis a day, maybe give them some exogenous ketones. So that is kind of an interesting thing that we have found from the genetics about why that subset of people does not recover the way other people do. And they continue to have headaches, brain fog, mood changes, disrupted sleep. So those could be some useful tools for that subset of people.
Yeah, I think that's another testament to why that gene testing is just so important to really see that, because then you know why. And then hey, keto is not going to work for everybody, but these people it really does work for.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so let's see a couple more questions we have here. Have you seen a link with personality issues like bipolar, BPD, or others in migraines?
Yeah, that's gonna be the brain chemistry subset for sure.
Yeah.
And it's, the good testing looks at not only serotonin, you need to look at glutamate. Glutamate is the main excitatory neurotransmitter in the brain, and there's too much of it in migraine. Short story, when people are having a migraine, glutamate's always up. That's actually what magnesium does. It drops down your glutamate, which is kind of cool. That's why it works both preventively and as an acute, a rescue therapy. So that one matters. GABA matters. Dopamine matters. All of those systems matter and are correlated to various degrees with the presence of migraine and various psychiatric illnesses.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
And another question here. Have you seen any links with, sorry, that's the one we just went through. No. Have you seen any links with PTSD, CPTSD, or trauma that's addressed through therapy or interventions? And have you seen those interventions help with migraines and, kind of going to like more of the trauma piece and the somatic piece?
Absolutely. I mean, we are mind-body organisms. We just are, especially the brain. And you do have to heal at the level of the mind as well as the body. One of my favorite tools for healing is yoga and meditation. I teach those two skills every single week to the people in my online courses. That's how important I think they are. Like, I take off the doctor hat and we do yoga and kind of a very specific style of meditation. The meditation research is fascinating. We probably don't have time to go down that rabbit hole too much, but short story, some things work, some things don't for chronic pain. And it's awesome to teach people what really works. And of course, in migraine, we have so much tension in the head and the neck and the shoulders, learning targeted yoga for that can be enormously helpful. We need to stay away from things that turn people upside down or get them too hot. So it can be harder to access that in your local yoga studio. There's a lot of upside down in most yoga studios. And that just increases intracranial pressure and makes it all worse. So, and then I think some of the interesting new tools are ketamine, of course, for PTSD. I just co-hosted a ketamine retreat with colleague, Dr. Jordana Quinn, who has massive expertise in ketamine. She was the guru. I was just there to do the meditation and bring the migraine patients. But, it's very interesting, that data for PTSD. She describes the ketamine as creating a blanket of new fallen snow in the brain. And then you can go, sled down it and create new grooves. I just thought that was beautiful. But I think there's a lot of potential for those sorts of therapies too. So, very, very, very mind-based therapies and very, chemistry-based therapies. I think there's exciting promise on both of those fronts for PTSD.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that with us. It's really fascinating.
Yeah.
And somebody asked, it sounds like you have your own, but they asked, what is your favorite genetic test to use? But I think that you mentioned that you had created the one that you needed for your purposes and what you found in your research.
Yeah, mine. I gotta say, that was my favorite one.
Yeah. I love that. And do you have any, I know you've touched on a couple of these, but do you have any specific supplements or companies that you prefer when you're kind of looking at some of the different ways to supplement?
Yeah. I think in terms of just starter supplements, put everybody on a high quality multivitamin. The things that matter for migraine, it's got to have methylated B vitamins. We know almost half of people with migraine have problems with methylation. So it's got to have at least methylated B12 and folate. It should have some vitamin D. It should have some CoQ10. And I think those are the biggies. If you have a multivitamin that does that, great. I think that magnesium is important too. One blood test that I do on a lot of people with migraines is an RBC magnesium level. I don't think we know exactly what it is about migraine that just makes you chew through that stuff so much, but I don't know, the brain loves it. It's just like, it's getting rid of it. I'm not sure, but levels are often low. And supplementing with magnesium has been shown in over 2 500 studies to reduce migraine. So we're hitting all the types here. You know, there's definitely a brain chemistry component. There's a vascular effect of magnesium. You know, we're hitting so many different of the subtypes. You can't really go wrong with that one. And I mean, 200 studies, hard to argue with that. So that's a great preventive. I like the ones that are highly absorbable, like magnesium glycinate, 400 to 500 milligrams at night. Really great place to start with that. And then fish oil, especially if you think inflammation is part of the picture. You might as well just start supplementing with some of that too, help out the brain cells and reduce inflammation. And you might reduce migraine just from the fish oil, as we were talking earlier in the show. So I think those are great supplements and startings. I'm not a slave to any particular brand, obviously just a high quality, third-party tested supplement. And from there, whatever you like.
Thank you. So many gems in there.
Yeah.
And yeah, that, let's see what else. We got a couple more here. I think we still have some time. So you did kind of mention meditation. It sounds like somebody does kind of want you to go down that rabbit hole. So
okay.
There's some meditation that is more, you know, that works better, and then some that doesn't. Can you tell us a little bit about, you know, maybe the type of meditation that you do?
Yeah. So I think that the key thing, especially for people with migraine, is don't tell them to just go clear your mind. Sit still and don't have any thoughts. They're going to drive themselves crazy usually. So you have to, what's more effective, it turns out, is to use your conscious mind and focus it on something. Your body is a great place to start. So you can help them shift their body into parasympathetic, you know, slow down your breathing, tell them all the things they're doing as they shift their body into parasympathetic. That's fantastic. You need a calm body for the rest of it to work. You can use devices like HeartMath to teach them how to make that shift effectively. So you start with breath, body focus that shuts off the default mode network in the brain. That's your mind chatter. Turns out making you focus on something else is more effective than consciously trying to just not think. So you do that first. Next step, layer in a positive emotion, joy, gratitude, relief, whatever you want to go with, whatever might resonate for that person, healing, their kids, their cat, you know, whatever it is, bring in a positive emotion. And then the third step you need to layer in is basically laying down the neural pathways for healing, right? You're mentally rehearsing in your mind ahead of the event. This is a little Joe Dispenza here. Some of you may have been to his events and you're thinking, was that kind of like it? Well, it's true. You got to lay down the neural pathways so you can rehearse that ahead of time. It's just like playing the piano. You can rehearse it in your head and you get better at playing. So that might be something concrete. I'm going to eat fiber every day, like, you know, super granular and easy. That might be, I am living a vibrant, whole, healthy life and, you know, living it in the moment, stepping into the part of yourself where that's already true. So that's kind of the 3-piece framework that seems to be the most effective. And you guys, what this will do, it will literally increase the serotonin circuits on a functional MRI. You can see these structures go from itty bitty. And then a year later, even with just 12 minutes a day of meditating, people have these gigantic serotonin dense circuits in their brain. You literally change the structure of your brain through something you do with your mind. It's the most fascinating thing ever. I'm probably sounding like a neurologist geek now, I know, but I just think that's crazy. Yeah. It's so cool.
It's cool because it is something that we think of as not super tangible. It's not this like supplement or this food, but it is something that is the power of our mind and that is actually translating into something physical. I find that absolutely.
I know. It makes a permanent change in your brain, and then you get to walk around with a different brain than you had before.
That's
wow.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And this has all kind of gotten me thinking, you know, I'm sure people come to you for migraines or people start out, they're like migraines. That's obviously the biggest thing. And that in itself is going to make a big difference in their life because they're able to, you know, live their life to the fullest and do all the things and not be missing out so much. But are there kind of, you know, it sounds like definitely with some of like the mood disorders and the sleep, but can you talk about maybe some of the other benefits as people start going down this path of healing? They're like, oh my, you know, this got better, but oh, wow. Like, so did all of these things. You know,
So glad you brought that up.
Is pretty
Yeah.
extensive.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because obviously when you're fixing those root causes, you're fixing all of the symptoms that stem from that root cause. And so, with brain chemistry, that might be the mood, that might be the insomnia. With mitochondrial problems, that might be your energy, that might be less brain fog if we're talking about inflammation. So yeah, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here a little bit, but yeah, you fix the root cause, you fix so many different things. It's definitely a much more effective way to spend your healthcare bandwidth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always think that like there's always the one thing that somebody's going to come to you for, but once you start looking at the root cause of that, there's always 10 other things that are going to feel better.
Right.
Once you start doing that.
They're going to get better in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I have a question about genes. It sounds like this might be a little bit more complex, but when looking at specific genes, someone asked which ones should we be looking for? For example, like the MTFHR gene for detoxing issues. It sounds like you have quite a bit of them that you look at, but are there any maybe specific ones that somebody that is maybe not as advanced in neurology should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, serotonin genes, glutamate genes, BDNF genes, inflammatory genes. You can look at HLA antigens for gluten sensitivity, lactose tolerance. You can look at MTHFR, obviously. There's, many different genes in the methylation cycle. You have to kind of put all those together and create a customized way to support methylation. GST, glutathione transferase genes, to look at detox, SOD2-GPX, to look at how they're clearing inflammation out of the cells. It's more like exhaust. I think of it as exhaust. You want to look at cytochrome P450 genes to look at how their liver is getting rid of. It's a little bit more for medications, but still an issue. And I think that's a good place to start.
Amazing. I feel like somebody's going to just be sitting there taking notes on all of this. That was
good.
Well, thank you.
More people who do the better.
You also mentioned high heat being an issue. Have you seen things like cold therapy or cold plunges? I know these are really popular now. Have you seen any help with that, or do those hurt, or how might those affect migraines?
Yeah, really interesting. Pretty much just the people with problems in their dopamine pathways. If they have problems with their adrenergic system, regulating, their panic response, if they've got problems with their serotonin system, they're not going to do as well with cold plunge. And I think at least with sauna, if you recommend sauna and instead, especially infrared, you're going to hit some brain chemistry, you're going to hit some mitochondrial detox. The red light will help the mitochondria, the sweat will help them detox. So I think if you're going to choose one or the other, because it's hard to get people to do everything, right? Mm-hmm. If you're going to just choose blind, go for sauna instead.
Absolutely. And I think that's another, testament to all these biohacks that you see and why not everything works for everybody, fasting at its time, its place, and cold plunging and all these things. But when you look at the specifics of it, it's like, it will be helpful for the people that, might fit into those genes or might have that specific problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then we're kind of running out of time here. So we'll answer some more of these questions in the comments. But I'd love to know what it looks like to kind of work with you, your online courses, what you offer. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, the genetic testing and implementing all the solutions, teaching people all this stuff, most of that is all just done in an online course. I'm there once a week for group Q&As to answer questions. But for the most part, people kind of get their results back. They figure out, it's pretty easy on the test results. What's not working. You figure out what's not working and you go to the course and figure out how you need to fix it. And you can start with very simple things. You can go to harder things. It's just kind of like each one is just its own little rabbit hole. So really, they do a lot of the work themselves. They just need the guidance about where to focus and which levers to press hardest, especially in the beginning when they're still feeling awful. Because, they may have 10 minutes a day to work on their health. Literally, that's it. And they're feeling terrible the rest of the time and just trying to, put out fires. So that is what the genetic testing looks like, but that's pricey. That's a lot, right? And if you want to just start maybe based on symptoms, just target a high impact area, maybe just target brain chemistry. I have very simple little courses that'll give you some high impact things, just kind of guessing, oh, this is probably you and this is probably going to work, that kind of thing. But you can save a lot of time and money that way. And for people who are having headaches, maybe, I don't know, 10 days a month, 15 days a month, maybe that's enough. And then they can just do the simple course. But for people who are really having headaches all the time, it's going to be a more complicated solution. They're going to have to change a dozen different things. And I think they benefit from having the full course. And of course they can keep taking their medications at the same time. I mean, I'm an MD. I was a pill pusher for 25 years. So, I mean, I have no issues with it. But a lot of people do want to get off their meds. But I think you've got to get them well first, and then you can start easing back on what you're doing, but let them feel the bliss of like being migraine free for a week or 2 or 3 or 4 at a time. And then ease back and see how things go.
And are these courses meant to target the clients and patients directly, or are they meant for practitioners to kind of understand and then filter that through into their clients and patients? Or is that for both?
Directly for clients. So it has been my mission to bring this directly to the people who need it the most. I am happy to help other practitioners implement as well. But I felt very, very strongly compelled to stop seeing one person at a time in the office and start trying to, instead of taking a bite out of this with a soup spoon, to start trying to take a bite out of it with a bulldozer, man. There are just so many people who need help. So all these courses are directly for the patients who are suffering.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And so we still have a few minutes. I think we went through all of those questions. So yeah, feel free to drop any additional questions if you're watching the replay. This has been such a great discussion. I'm so grateful for all the work you do, Amelia. Can you tell people about where they can find these courses, where they can find you online?
Yeah, honestly, the best place to start for patients is theheadachequiz.com. It just walks them through what their genetic migraine type is likely to be, offers up some solutions. They get a free ebook, so they can start there. Maybe that'll help. If not, there's these low ticket courses. Maybe that'll help. If not, they can go all in and get their genetics done and really commit to it. For practitioners who want to talk to me, just go to my website. It's my name, ameliascottbarrettmd.com. And there's like a contact button, and just send me an email, and we can work something out. I mean, I have concrete programs to, work together, but I think the bottom line is let's figure out what works for you. Let's create something that works in your workflow and helps you take better care of people, to, leverage this new technology so that we can take care of as many women as we can, get women plugged back into their lives, into their families, into their careers, doing all the things that women do, taking care of everything and everybody.
Just probably part of the root cause that kind of feeds into this as well. Amazing. Well, thank you so much. We'll make sure that we link to all of that in the show notes as well. If you're listening to this podcast, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our live streams. Our next one is in 2 weeks with our guest, Courtney Cowie from the FDN Consults. And in our Hicks community, join us next Tuesday, September 2nd at 10 a.m. Pacific time for another Best Practices with the Biocanic team. And again, on Thursday, September 4th at 10 a.m. for a special coffee circle with our special guest, plus CBD. So thank you so much again. We really appreciate you. We have so many gems, and I just feel like I learned so much.
Oh, good. Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to, shed light on some of the new resources that are out there for us.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Mm-hmm.